If you try to fill up a water glass with a waterfall or put out a forest fire with a garden hose, you'll quickly learn flow rate matters. The same thing happens with injectors, and that's why it's important to choose the right size for your truck. Today we're going to be talking about the key questions people often ask so you can figure out how to pick the right ones. No! If your truck is completely stock, you shouldn't be looking at hard parts at all. A few simple lines of code with a custom tuner can give your truck sometimes up to 300 more horsepower than it has from factory. Although you should get a lift pump to keep your fuel supply steady when you start adding more horsepower, especially if you have a Duramax. But technically you can just tune it and go. Once again, you should get a lift pump. And for every modification that we're going to talk about following, a custom tune file is pretty much a necessity. Modern trucks are run entirely by computers, so you kind of have to tell it what you're changing. It's like handing your grandfather a TikTok account without showing him how to use it. That truck will start dumping black smoke faster than AI can drain his retirement savings. Get a lift pump. Trying to feed big injectors without a lift pump is like trying to feed a pressure washer with a teacup. It just doesn't work. And sure, if you have a Cummins or a PowerStroke, then you're going to have that factory lift pump, which will help you get higher into the power range. But if you have a Duramax, there is no lift pump, and all of a sudden you're going to see low fuel pressure rail codes like you're going to see text from the missus after a couple of beers turns into a few beers. Now that you've sorted out the fuel supply, then you can start looking at changing hard parts if you want to climb past that 450 to 500 horsepower range. And at this point, you can finally start looking at your turbo. I know this is a video about fuel injectors, but one of the cool things about modern diesels is none of them have a bigger turbo than they have fuel supply. So if you want to make 100 extra wheel horsepower, 150 sometimes more than your tuned max capacity stock truck, a turbocharger will get you there before injectors will. There's just more fuel supply than air supply. Any of those OEM Plus style turbos can push your truck into the 550 wheel horsepower range without looking at a set of 6 or 8 injectors depending on your truck. Yes, you are now at the hard limit of your factory fuel system. It's time to upgrade your injectors. And from here, there's a lot of options. The starting setup you want to go with is probably an OEM Plus style injector, just like the turbocharger you just added. That's where you'll get into a setup like this, S&S TorqueMaster injectors. These are OEM Plus style injectors, just like the turbocharger, that give you a slightly higher ceiling on your fuel system. They'll work with your factory high pressure pump, and they'll do a really good job pushing you into a nice, usable, daily driving 600 to 650 wheel horsepower truck on a lot of the later model diesels, 2010 plus kind of thing. And you're gonna have an awesome driving truck that makes 600 to 650 horsepower to the wheels that you can still use as a daily truck without having to upgrade too many more things. All right, now we're talking about the big systems. This is it where you start getting into the 700 plus kind of horsepower range. From here, you're gonna be looking at injectors that are 30, 50, 75% over, and it's harder to really know what your truck's gonna need to hit the power levels you want. But actually, it's not that hard. S&S Diesel has an awesome fuel system planner that they've laid out in a really nice way. This is available on their website, it's linked in the description. This is how you can pick the fuel system mods that you need to support the horsepower levels that you want. You pick a horsepower level, you look up and see the pump requirements, and then you see the injector size requirements, and they have it for every single late model diesel that is out on the market, along with their injection pumps. You've got tons of options here and a great amount of information, but there's a story that these papers don't tell. It pains me to say this next part, but bigger isn't always better. You see, a TorqueMaster set of injectors along with like a BD Screamer turbo, making that 600 to 650 horsepower mark, you are pushing more power than any factory transmission is really designed to do. It might do it for a while, but how long, you don't know. So when you start looking at 100% over set of injectors in an S480 turbo, you're not just buying that one kit. It's the whole ballpark, and you can just run some of the parts out until they fail, but you kind of have to budget in their future failure into your decisions. And once you're past certain horsepower levels, like we talked about in our turbo video, it takes a lot of money to make big power drive in a way that you want to use it every single day. At some point, it might be worth looking at your tow pig and a race truck, rather than having one try to do both. That is actually a pretty good move. A tuner can reduce pulse width and detune the injector to a point that it'll act like a smaller one, within reason. And that means that you can actually have a bigger injector in your truck first instead of buying one every 100 horsepower increment that you want to go up. If you know you're going to try to hit 700 one day, you don't need to buy 3 sets of injectors to get there. You can't completely hide the fact that they're bigger injectors. Haze at idle is a thing that's going to happen, and there could be a physical limit to the rest of your fuel system components, like your factory injection pump might not be able to supply the rail pressure to the larger injectors without losing rail pressure codes, just like we were talking about earlier with the Duramaxes. There's a limit, but you can step up. And it's easier to make slightly oversized injectors act like the system it should be than it is to make an oversized turbo drive like it should without the fuel to support it. Which means if you're going to try to pick between doing a turbo first or your fuel system first, the fuel system's generally a better setup because you can mask it easier. If you have 1,000 horsepower worth of fuel and 500 horsepower worth of air, but you run it wide open, the fuel system at max capacity, you're gonna have a smoky, poor running, lower powered truck than if you just set it up properly. You might wash down your cylinders, and Gail Banks will make a video saying how bad your setup is.
Oh my God, come on.
The next question you might ask is, do I want remanufactured injectors or new ones? If you don't know what a remanufactured injector is, it's where they take the body of the injector that was sent back as a core to S&S, and they make sure by sending it off to get tested that the body itself flows within a certain percentage of a new one. But the rest of the injector from the electronic standpoint is replaced. The only part that's left is the physical body, which means if it passes, it's going to act the same and have a very similar warranty to a new one at a great discount. Kind of seems like a win-win. Some people don't like the idea of having a used part in your truck, and that's totally fair. The new injectors are awesome. But for most of us here, that idea doesn't really scare us, and we run these in most of our trucks. Your butt dyno won't notice, but your wallet certainly will. So if you've done the research and you have a general idea of what you're doing, but you have a couple of questions, or you're just starting out and have no idea where you're going, give us a call at the front desk because our service staff lives diesel trucks. We know this and we spend our days talking about it, and we're happy to help you answer any questions you might have or steer you in the right direction if you're curious about drivability, reliability, or the best bang for your buck. If you are interested in this but for turbochargers, click this video here.